LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Swarbrick on Sunday with Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
Very good morning to you. 3 minutes past 11 is the time. Welcome to the show. Tom Swarbrick with you on LBC this Sunday morning. Hope we find you as well as can possibly be. I am delighted to say that for the next hour of the programme, I am joined live in the studio by two men running to be the next Mayor of London. The Labour candidate Sadiq Khan and the Conservative candidate Shaun Bailey, both live in the studio taking your calls for the next hour. You can put any question to them that you would like. 0345 6060 973. This postponed mayoral campaign, of course, because of COVID, going ahead on the 6th of May. We have more than 6 million people registered to vote in the capital. And I'm delighted to say that two of the candidates, Sadiq Khan, Shaun Bailey, in the studio live for the next 60 minutes taking your call. Gents, it is genuinely lovely to see you both in the studio, given everything we've been through over the last 12 months. Thank you for coming in. We're going to take calls and questions, but before we came on this morning, we decided about who would be going first in the opening statements. Mr. Bailey, you decided correctly on the coin toss, so it is a minute for you, sir, to make your pitch to Londoners about why you should be their next mayor.
Good morning, London. It's great to see you all, and I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Look, London needs a fresh start. We need an opportunity to turn around 5 years of failure that's been characterised by no delivery in London, missed housing targets, low police numbers, and of course, women and girls on the streets not being safe as told to us by our current mayor. So what do we need to do? We need to follow my plan for a fresh start. I have a plan to generate 925,000 jobs in the next 5-year period. I have a plan to deliver 100,000 homes for £100,000. I'll also put 8,000 police officers on the streets of London to be accompanied by 4,000 youth workers as well. Youth zones in every borough in London as well. And when we talk about crime in particular, it's a very, very, very thing we have to do here. We have to make sure that our women and girls are safe on the streets of London. So 1,000 dedicated officers to that cause to make sure that women and girls are safe on the streets of London, but also we tackle hate crime as well.
Shaun Bailey, thank you very much. Same to you. Sadiq Khan, a minute to make your pitch, sir.
Londoners face a huge choice on May the 6th. Our city has been through so much over the last year. And this election is about how we build an even better London after the pandemic than before, with a brighter future for our city. It's about jobs, 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 that being the priority. And it's about creating a greener, fairer and safer city where all Londoners get the chance they need to fulfil their potential. You know me and what motivates me. I grew up on a council estate and my experiences have shaped who I am today and my ambitions for tomorrow. So if you love London like I do, if you want to rebuild our city so it's even better after the pandemic than before, if you want a brighter future for London, if you love London, vote for London by voting for me and Labour on May the 6th.
Almost exactly a minute. Sadiq Khan, thank you very much indeed. Your calls to come, 0345 6060 973 is the number. Let's get straight into it. Joanne is in Surbiton this morning. Morning, Joanne.
Hi, morning everyone. My question is to both candidates. As a woman in London, I'm concerned that both your responses to violence against women centre on more CCTV and more police, and I'm uncomfortable with the view that this might head towards a police state, and this doesn't tackle the root cause of the problem, in my view, which is misogyny against women. So my question is, what will you be making misogyny a hate crime? And what else will you do to tackle the root cause of the problem?
OK, Joanne, stay there if you would. Sadiq Khan, what are you going to do to keep women and girls safe in this city?
Well, Joanne, thank you for taking the time to ring in. Firstly, look, there's three blokes on this in this LBC studio, and I think we've got to have the humility to realise, as empathetic as we may be, your experiences as a woman are different to ours. So firstly, yes, I've been calling for 5 years for misogyny to be made a hate crime. Stella Creasy, the campaign and MP, first brought this to my attention when I became elected mayor. That's not all, though, Joanne. We've got to start in the school. So our boys are taught about relationships. Our boys are taught how to respect girls in schools, because what happens is at an early age, boys, you're right, sometimes can experience the feeling that girls are less than they are. And there is, I'm afraid, a culture of misogyny. And one of the things I want to do, Joanne, is not simply to make misogyny a hate crime. I think sexual harassment should be a crime as well. And I think there should be a domestic abuse register. Over the last 5 years, we've invested £61 million in tackling the issue of violence against women and girls, targeting the perpetrators' behaviour as well as supporting women. Yes, of course, we've got to protect women, Joanne. We've got to target the behaviour of men and boys that's leading to women feeling less safe.
Some of those changes are required in law and would be done by Parliament. Let me just read you your own words. Forward to Police and Crime Plan 2017 to 2021. You wrote, "Safety is my highest priority as Mayor of London." And yet, a few weeks ago, you told one of my colleagues on this station that London's streets are not safe for women and girls. That's a failure.
That's the experience of women, Tom, and you as a man should have the humility to accept the experience of women. But let me tell you where we've been successful.
So you weren't wrong to say London streets are not safe for women and girls?
Women and girls feel safe. Look, between International Women's Day last year and this year, across the country, 118 women have lost their lives, 12 of them in London. That is a fact. But let me tell you where we've been successful, why we should be hopeful. We managed to persuade the government at last to make upskirting a criminal offence. Great campaign from Gina Martin. We managed to persuade the government to make revenge porn a criminal offence. And we need to lobby the government to change the law to protect women. It is the case, I'm afraid, Tom. We may not like it, but women don't feel safe across the country, across the globe and in London. That means targeting the behaviour of men and boys as well as protecting women.
Shaun Bailey, you accused Sadiq Khan of failing on crime. You were the youth and crime advisor to David Cameron and George Osborne when the cuts were implemented. What advice did you give them about making the cuts to youth service at that time?
Don't do it. My job at number 10 was to start the biggest youth project this country's ever seen. Some 600,000 young people have been through the National Citizen Service and we're counting they're still going. But what 20 years of youth work showed me, directly to Joanne's question, is two things. We should be using the interactions that we have with young people to change their behaviour, to make them understand there's different ways to conduct themselves. So when I talk about 4,000 youth workers across London, that's our opportunity to have those conversations to help change the culture amongst young people. The other piece I'd say, though, Joanne, it is a fact, as said by Sadiq Khan, that women and girls are not safe on the streets of London. So therefore, we do need an enforcement piece as well. And an important part of that enforcement piece is to allow the police to collect the evidence to get convictions.
So why couldn't you persuade George Osborne and David Cameron that they were making the wrong call to cut youth and crime services? As their advisor, as someone who argues that as a Conservative you would have the ear of government to be able to talk to them, you couldn't persuade them?
Yeah, because the point here in London is, what do we do now with what we had? We've had 5 wasted years. For instance, my plan is to put £450 million into youth work in London. That's my experience of youth work showing.
But if you're trying to make the argument 4 years ago, as a man with 20 years in that service, helping people, you're trying to make that argument, they weren't listening. You talk about standing up for London. You can't stand up for yourself.
Yeah, well, girls, right here, right now, when I have the lever to pull, I will pull the lever. And I go back to the fact we've been failed for the last 4.5 years. You then have to figure out what we do next. And what we do next, we do the enforcement piece. That's why you hear me talk about 1,000 extra police officers in safeguarding units to look after the women and girls on the streets of London. But most importantly, you talk about changing the culture amongst young people as well. So we have a change in how women and girls interact with people, how their interactions are judged, how everything happens, so we have less of this attacks, less of this upskirting.
It's gone.
Well, Joanne, all I say is I've listened to you and answered your question, but I've heard Shaun Bailey for the last 3 minutes with excuses for his failure. He's not answered your question, Joanne.
Again, let me put it to you like this, Joanne. I separate this out into two pieces. One, we have to have the enforcement piece. We have to give the police the opportunity to collect the evidence to get these convictions. That's the first piece. And the second piece around changing culture. We speak to our young people regularly through the 4,000 youth workers I provide. We use schools officers as well. And of course, we look at how we train the police, how that interaction goes.
Let me bring Joanne back in. Joanne, what do you make of what you've heard?
Can I just step in and say that both of you are acknowledging that we have to speak to young people and young boys, but you're not giving me any clear actions. You're not setting out how you're going to do this. And I think my worry is it's going to be, just a tokenistic that we will speak to young people. You're not telling me how you're going to do this. And
well, let me just answer, Joanne. Let me let the candidates answer. Sadiq Khan, you go first.
Well, John, there's two really important pieces of work that are going to take place. Firstly, in the classroom, we've got to make sure boys at an early age understand their behaviour's consequences. So it is the case, Joanne, and you know this, that girls at schools are choosing the length of the skirt they wear and the footwear they wear and stop doing sports because of the behaviour of boys. We start in the schools with a relationship education.
It's a big societal change. That's a huge thing to try and
we've got to
try and change that, though.
But that's how profound this issue is. We live in a patriarchal society where I'm afraid some of the comments of people like Shaun Bailey perpetuate the misogyny that exists in our culture. And similarly, Joanne, as far as the police are concerned, you're right, we can't police ourselves our way out of this. Yes, of course, we need to make sure there's additional police officers. The police now do have across London not only good work taking place in relation to stalking, good work taken in relation to the predatory behaviour of men, but also we've got to make sure we support those women fleeing domestic abuse. So, for example, Joanne, over the last 5 years, I've been supporting victims groups and survivors groups at the same time as targeting the behaviour of men. We've got to continue that investment rather than a new era of austerity.
Let me pick up on that point,
which I worry about.
And let's get Shaun Bailey into it. Shaun Bailey, the Mayor saying we live in or Sadiq Khan saying that we live in a patriarchal society. Do you agree?
That's entirely true. But when it comes to what the Mayor can do in London, we have wasted 5 years. We could have put these youth workers across all of our communities in London already having this conversation, and we make this a part of why these youth workers are funded and the organisations in which they're working in. That's how you get change from City Hall, because as you said, Tom, it is a big thing to ask schools to do. They may not want to do it. The Mayor has to focus on what he can do first with his resources.
Joanne, thank you so much for your call. Let's come to more of your calls. 0345 6060 973 is the number. Ezekiel is in Lewisham. Hi, Ezekiel.
Hi, how you doing? You right?
Yes, good, sir. Your question.
Yeah, awesome. So, right, I strongly believe that charity begins from home, and the way to build a nation is actually building first from the family and then to the community, and obviously it goes on from there. And we noticed that there's a lot of knife crime it's very rampant. It's becoming a bit it's getting out of hand, to be honest with you. And, the mentality of this clan-like mentality needs to be dissolved. I just want to know that I know that the solution is within family. So how would you create a stronger community of parents? Because it has to come from the parents. When you have a strong community of parents, the kids won't want to behave out of line because they know that their parents are together on this.
Let's put that. So let's ask Shaun first. Shaun Bailey, how are you going to get a better community of parents to keep those kids in line, as Ezekiel says?
Ezekiel, thank you for the question. And of course, you're right. I did 20 years of youth work, and you realise the children that you can move to a safer place, a more productive place, you have to have their family, their broader community around it. So that's why you hear me focus on youth work, because it gives us the opportunity to use the resources of City Hall to make those connections with local families, to get deep into a community and have an ongoing long-term conversation. For young people, these conversations need to happen over a period of time. One of the biggest failings that's happened in London now is that when the Mayor became Mayor, when Sadiq Khan became Mayor, he said it'll take 10 years to solve knife crime. That gave carte blanche to criminals across the city. They felt like they were empowered. And I've been speaking to so many communities who say we need to get on top of this knife crime because it's affecting everything we do, including the performance of our children in school.
You've empowered,
how safe they feel.
You've empowered knife crime in this city, Mr. Mayor.
Well, look, firstly, Ezekiel, thank you for your question. I mean, look, Shaun Bailey, who was accepted, he was the youth and crime advisor to David Cameron and George Osborne, who personally oversaw these cuts, blaming me for the increase in knife crime. It's like an arsonist who starts a fire, blaming the fire brigade for not putting out the flames quickly enough. Ezekiel, listen, the increase in crime has a number of complex reasons. You know this. I'm not excusing it, but it's a fact. Alienation, lack of opportunity, deprivation. And that's why it's really important not to give glib answers. We've got to both invest in young people, but also make sure our police have the resources. And that's why over the last 5 years, I'm the Mayor, in the face of government cuts, who's invested £70 million in young Londoners. We've now got, Ezekiel, youth workers in youth clubs, in A&Es, in pupil referral units, in schools, in police stations, diverting young people away from criminal gangs and nonsense.
Is it working? Is it working? 10 teenagers have died in a knife attack. 10 teenagers have died in a knife attack in London this year. That's already more than half the 15 who were killed in a similar manner in 2020. The money's good, the talk is good, but it's not actually doing anything for people.
It's not working.
You talk about numbers. Let's talk about people. I've actually, both as a member of Parliament and as the Mayor Ezekiel, meet regularly with not just the victims of knife crime, but with bereaved families. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doubly motivated to resolve this issue. Let me look at some of the progress we're making in relation to knife crime. So youth violence has been going down since I've become Mayor. Knife crime injuries for those below the age of 25 has been going down. Other types of crime that's going down, Ezekiel, because of the hard work of the police and youth workers, is around burglaries, moped-enabled crimes, gun crime, and the rest. But let me deal with this, though, Ezekiel, in relation to going forward. We've got to make sure young people have constructive opportunities to have the potential fulfilled. So if I'm re-elected, we're going to roll out so every young person has a mentor, but also there'll be good youth facilities near every young person.
Let me bring
By the way, Ezekiel, the reason why I'm keen to focus on jobs, though, Ezekiel, is to avoid the sort of unemployment we saw in the 1980s.
Look, Ezekiel, your question talked about parents and how do we get deep into communities, and that's a misunderstanding I think the Mayor has. That's why you hear me focus on what we would be placing in those communities and how those communities use that information that we can then disseminate to help parents understand some of the new challenges of being a young person that maybe didn't exist when they were young. But let's look, we have money in City Hall. I'm talking about spending £450 million on youth work in London in a 3-year period to give charities a sustained piece of funding and also to do some capital projects as well. But here's the key. If we have a mayor who does not take responsibility for crime, it will spiral out of control. We've had a 67% increase in robberies, a 60% increase in knife crime. And if you believe crime is going down, I'd ask any Londoner now, speak to the teenagers around you, be they family, be they friends, be they neighbours, ask them if they think crime's going down. Ezekiel started his question out by saying it's getting out of hand. It's been out of hand for a long time. And if we're going to get on top of it, we need some leadership.
All right, Ezekiel, thank you for your question. A couple from me to talking about policing specifically. Shaun Bailey, you didn't feel the need to criticise the way in which the police handled the Sarah Everard vigil. Why not?
Here's what I would say to people about Sarah Everard. I said very early on, this is a conversation between the Mayor of London, the group who want to put on the vigil, and Londoners. The Mayor should have been there to represent London. He didn't. Instead, he said it's between the government and the police. The Mayor will be well aware that he's the Police and Crime Commissioner for London.
But you didn't criticise the police tactics.
Hold on. I'll tell you, for London, the point I'm trying to make, it never needed to get there. If there was a proper representation, it wouldn't have needed to get there. The Mayor should have said, I want this to go ahead, find ways to make it work. The organisers of the vigil have good ideas to make it work. But here's the key thing. The Mayor then condemned the police before he had any evidence to condemn them. I never condemned them because I needed the evidence to condemn them. It is more than appropriate to condemn the actions of the police when they're wrong, but you have to make sure they're wrong before you go out.
You said the police were completely wrong to do what they did. And hang on a sec. And an MPCC report that came out later said that the police were absolutely right to conduct themselves in the manner in which they conducted themselves. Do you think you got it wrong?
There's a very important point that you've just missed here, which is really important. Somebody aspiring to be the Mayor of London has said he would tell the police to find a way to do it. And it's really important because it shows he does not understand the powers of a politician versus the power of the police. Operational matters shouldn't be dictated by a politician. I'm quite clear.
But didn't you just do that by saying that the police got it completely wrong? You're dictating operational matters. You think the manner in which they handled that Everard vigil was completely wrong. That's dictating operationally what the police should do.
I'm giving my opinion on operational matter. They're very different, Tom. So, according to Shaun Bailey, in advance of an operational matter, he would dictate to the police how to respond. That is wrong.
Tom, I say two things. If you're sat
I've written it down.
If you're sat at home now and you're thinking, Shaun said he would have told the police he wants them to help this vigil happen, you are correct. It's exactly what I said.
No, you said find a way to do it.
Find a way. I meant what I said and I said what I meant. But let's be clear, when it suits the Mayor politically, he will. Because when it came to Extinction Rebellion, when he thought it'd be advantageous to him, he supported them to the hill. Why couldn't he support the women and girls of London to have this vigil at a very important moment for them? I have no idea.
Whoever the Mayor of London is also the Police and Crime Commissioner for London.
Absolutely.
The Police and Crime Commissioner has a legal responsibility for setting the strategic direction of policing in London. What is your strategic direction for policing in London when you were Mayor?
The priority is to reduce violence across London. The priority is particularly to reduce violence where young people are involved, those below the age of 25. The Police and Crime Plan that I published 4 years ago sets that out. We're making progress, but I've been honest with Londoners. I've been honest about the causes of crime, and I was also, at the time you were working for Theresa May, making the point, Tom, that actually cuts have consequences. And the point I make is it's really important to understand you can't cut from the police, you can't cut from youth services, you can't cut from public services and not expect a consequence. And by the way, it was my lobbying of the successor to your employer, Boris Johnson, who accepted my lobbying and promised to put back 20,000 police officers across the country when more than 21,000 had been cut. And here's the good news. Since I've been elected mayor, because of council tax rates from City Hall and business rates from City Hall, we from City Hall have funded 13,000 additional police officers, but it doesn't replace the officers, the community support officers, the police staff, the police stations, the youth centres, the youth workers who we've lost. But I'm doing my bit to lay the foundations to reduce violent crime.
Are you then, hang on a sec, are you then disappointed by the return that you're getting on seeing violence reduced, given that 10 teenagers have died in a knife attack in London? Do you think that the Met Police is capable of carrying out your strategic direction?
Listen, it's heartbreaking, man. I mean, I meet these families, both when I was the MP and as mayor, and I'm a parent. You know, I've cried with these parents, and you know, that's what motivates me to go even further, and that's why it's really important that Londoners choose a mayor who will continue to invest in our police and youth services. And by the way, lepers don't change their spots. Shaun is accepted. He was the youth and crime advisor when the cuts began. He also accepted, by the way, he was very unsuccessful in persuading his bosses to change their minds. Why do we think things will be different if he becomes the mayor?
Shaun Bailey.
What I accepted is that I started the biggest youth programme this country has ever seen. That's what I accepted. But do you know what would be better, Tom? All of this would be so much easier to believe from the mayor if he wasn't the one, as his first act when he became mayor of London was to take £38 million out of the police staffing budget. So if you're sat at home now and you think it's all about resources, why did he do that? That guaranteed we'd have a record low number of police officers into the future, the consequence of having a mayor who had no focus on public safety. He then went on to threaten to take an extra 110 million away from the police, therefore defunding the police and weakening their position on the streets. So when you ask me what my plan is for London around crime, it's to make the streets safer by having 8,000 extra police officers, by reopening 38 police stations closed by Sadiq.
As Mayor of London, if you're elected Mayor of London, would you extend Cressida Dick's contract?
Yes, I don't think Cressida Dick has been our problem. I think Sadiq Khan has been our problem. You're talking about a mayor who said, I've done my bit. You've never done your bit to solve crime in London. You're talking about a mayor, when he's first talked about, he's offered the idea of a violence reduction unit, he poo-pooed the idea.
Same question to you, Sadiq Khan. Do you want Cressida Dick in charge of the Met?
Yeah, she's done a great job. I'm really proud to play a role in appointing her. She's the country's first, in history, our first female commissioner. I'm really proud as the mayor to have appointed the first fire commissioner who's a woman, the first Met commissioner who's a woman, the first chief officer of City Hall who's a woman, and that's what it means having a proud feminist in City Hall.
Let's come to more of your calls. Alexi's a new caller in Brentwood this morning. Hi, Alexi.
Hello. I have a call about air quality. I lived in East London for a number of years. The air quality was awful. I had severe asthma. I was constantly coughing and had asthma attacks. I moved out to Brentwood just to get cleaner air. What are you going to do about the air quality in London to stop more young people moving out of the city?
Good question, Sadiq Khan.
Alexi, when did you leave London?
I left London a year ago.
Okay. Well, I'm as concerned as you about the issue of air quality. I'm somebody who, as an adult, got asthma when I was training to run the marathon for a charity in 2014. But also I know from personal experience that actually because of the poor air quality, you're right, a number of consequences. Children have permanently stunted lungs. Adults have a whole host of health issues from asthma to cancer to heart disease. When I became mayor, I discovered in a drawer hidden away a report done for Boris Johnson in 2013, and it showed that more than 500 schools were in parts of London where the air was unlawful. So let me tell you what I've done, Alexi. We've got the world's first ultra-low emission zone, and so there's been a 97% reduction in schools in areas where the air is unlawful. There's been a 94% reduction in homes where the air is unlawful.
You're going to extend that, ULEZ?
Well, let me tell you the benefits first, Tom. We've seen in central London the toxic air reduced by half across London, by a third, but also by having a fivefold increase in cycling, by encouraging people to walk by freezing fares for 5 years, saving the average household £200. We've improved the quality of air in London, and Tom is right. I do want to extend the ultra-low emissions out to the North Circular, and
that comes at a cost to the users.
Let me finish Alexi's question with respect, Tom. I do want to extend, Alexi, the ultra-low emissions out to the North Circular and South Circular, but also get more walking and more cycling so we can continue to improve the quality of air in London.
Shaun Bailey.
Alexi, I think the mistake the mayor has made here is to charge people to answer our poor air quality question in London. So every time you hear about fixing the air, all of a sudden the poorest people in London are landed with a new bill. What the mayor should do, is what I plan to do, is to make the entire bus fleet green. That's the equivalent of taking 1.1 million cars from the roads from an air quality.
Well, where are you going to get the money to do that?
It's already wrapped up in the bus contract, and it's the same hold on. It's the same £130 million going to have to spend just putting cameras in. Okay. Cameras that will very shortly become out of date. If you want to clean the air up in London, it's common sense. If something is putting out dirty air, you remove the source. You don't just charge Londoners more and more and more money to exist in London.
If that money's wrapped up, why haven't you done it?
Sure. It's really important to distinguish this. Shaun Bailey has said it'll cost £180 million to green our buses, right? Shaun, how many buses?
Absolutely did not say that. I said it cost you £130 million to put cameras in. Okay. That's what I said.
How many buses in London?
9,000.
How much does an electric double-decker bus cost?
240 grand, I think.
400,000. Times 9,000 by 400,000, what does it come to?
Tell me.
3.6 billion. Where's the money, Shaun?
You get the money out of the system. We buy new buses.
£3.6 billion in 3 years.
Anybody listen to this now would see, oh, the mayor clever, he knows it. No, he doesn't. We buy new buses all the time. The bus contractors do them. And when we will sign the contracts, we will sign into that contract that you bring a new bus in as speedily as possible. The idea that I'm saying that City Hall should buy all the buses is ridiculous. The point is this, yeah? We need to take action that actually cleans the air in London, not action that costs you as Londoners. Remember, he wants to extend the ultra-low emission zone. He wants to bring in an outer London border tax. He's raised council tax by 31% across his term because the mayor has failed to control the finances of London, and he's making you at home pay for it.
I'm going to chuck some numbers in as well. 99% of Londoners still live in areas exceeding the World Health Organization limit for PM 2.5, the particularly harmful residues from exhausts and also tyre and brake wear. 99%.
Well, firstly, I know you want to run away from the fact that Shaun can't do maths, and the nearer we get to the election, the more fantastic and remarkable his promises become. Let me deal with that's particulate matter, and that's why, by the way, I've been lobbying the government in the new bill going through Parliament to use the WHO definition of what the particulate matter should be, the 2.5 model. That's one of the reasons we've done so. And by the way, that's particulate matter as far as nitrogen dioxide is concerned. Because all our buses now in London are ULEZ compliant, we've reduced by more than 90% the amount of toxic emissions from our buses.
OK, let's get another call on before we get to the news. Star is in Erith in Kent. Hi, Star.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi.
Your question, far away.
Both candidates, please, if I could. The congestion charge, I believe that it was just a temporary measure during the COVID situation to extend it to 7 days a week, 24/7. Are there any plans to return it to the original? And also, with the ULEZ, what are the future plans for extending that?
OK, Star, thank you. On the congestion charge, we were led to believe that it was a temporary measure to extend the time that people were going to be charged in from, I think it was 6:30 to 10 o'clock at night. When is that changing?
Well, firstly, Star, thanks for your question. So TFs are like all transport authorities across the world, because of the pandemic, have had fewer passengers using the service, and so we've needed short-term government support to help us during this difficult time. And what the government said to me was they're willing to give me short-term financial support. One of the conditions of the government giving me short-term financial support is, if you remember, I suspended the congestion charge. They said you've got to bring it back straight away, but also you've got to extend and widen the scope. So before it was Monday to Friday, they said you've got to go 7 days a week up to 10 p.m, which is what we've done. It is a temporary measure, but one thing I was able to succeed on was the government was also saying I should extend the congestion charge to the North Circular and the South Circular, which would have caught 4 million additional Londoners. I managed to win the argument. I wasn't able to win the argument to take it 7 days a week up to 10 p.m, but I hope, Star, that we can go back to some sense of normality as the pandemic ends. And one of the things I'll be doing as the mayor, you know my record, Star, over the last 5 years we didn't increase the congestion charge, we didn't change its scope, and so once the pandemic comes towards an end, I'll be negotiating with the government, so we don't have to have it 7 days a week up to 10 p.m.
Shaun Bailey, quick answer.
Star, what the mayor said to you simply is untrue. On Good Morning Britain himself, he said it was a decision he made to increase the scope and the cost of the congestion charge. So I leave you to draw the conclusions that you'd like to do from that. The whole point about an ultra-low emission zone, I think it doesn't need to be extended. I think there's better ways, more cost-effective ways.
Even though it's been very effective in getting air quality.
But that's because the middle of London,
much better.
In the middle of London, it makes sense because if you look at the heat map of poor air quality, it's a very, very congested zone. We all know about the amount of traffic in the middle of London. It's not the same when you get that far out. So you then end up charging some of the poorest people in London to pay for the richest people to drive around. I just don't think that's correct. If you want to improve the air quality in those areas, you can do it by changing the buses and also giving black cabs a £6,000 interest-free loan to speed up the adoption of the new cab. Because once all those cabs are off the road, that's the equivalent of taking another 1 million cars off the road from a low emissions point of view. But the key thing here is, if the mayor is so willing to manipulate a message over something like this, again, his words that it was a decision he made, what else is he manipulating in order not to face the reality that Londoners are having to pay for poor financial decisions made in City Hall?
Right. Shaun Bailey, we'll leave it there for now. We'll come back to these questions in a few moments' time. Lots of people want to get on the air this morning. 0345 6060 973 is the number. Sadiq Khan, the Labour candidate for mayor, Shaun Bailey, Conservative candidate, with me until 12 this afternoon. Do get your calls in. Tom Swarbrick here. Let's get some news at 11:33. Here's Holly Harris.
Labour's Jess Phillips is calling for a root and branch independent inquiry following claims made by Dominic Cummings about Tory donors being asked to pay for the Prime Minister's renovations at his flat. She's told Swarbrick on Sunday on LBC she wants fundamental change, but she's not hopeful it will come. Hospitals in India are having to turn coronavirus patients away because of a shortage of beds and oxygen. The country's reported a world record number of cases for the fourth day in a row. English football is uniting against online abuse with a boycott of social media. Governing bodies and organisations like the FA, the Premier League, the FA Women's Super League and the EFL will suspend their accounts over 4 days from Friday. The weather, another fine, dry and bright afternoon. Plenty of sunshine around for most places. Breezy in the south, a high of 15 Celsius.
LBC Swarbrick on Sunday with Tom Swarbrick on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
11:38 the time, taking your calls with Sadiq Khan, the Labour candidate for Mayor of London, Shaun Bailey as well, the Conservative candidate, here until midday. Jason, you're in Holland Park and you're on the radio. Your question, sir, fire away.
Hello, gentlemen. Question to both of you, although Sadiq has got a track record and I pretty well know what Sadiq's answer will be, but it's aimed at both of you. In the event of a conflict of interest, what will you be loyal to first, the city or your party?
Sadiq Khan.
The city, Jason, I think you've mentioned this. You saw over the last 5 years, on occasions, standing up against my leader because it's important to stand up for our city. That means sometimes, Jason, working with the government where it's in our city's interest to do so, but standing up to them as well. And the same goes for my party. And you saw, Jason, my views in relation to staying in the European Union. You saw my views in relation to, I thought, the behaviour of the Labour Party in relation to not taking seriously allegations, very serious allegations of anti-Semitism. I think the future for London is one that's got to be focused upon now that we're outside the European Union. I don't think it is, by the way, good opportunities for our city, as Shaun does. I think it's going to be challenging, but I think our underlying strengths are very strong, and that's why I'm hopeful about the future. But absolutely, I'm the champion advocate for our city.
What have you worked best with the government?
Issues around working with them in relation to arguing for the best for our city. So we played tie quite well with the government in relation to trade missions, really well with the Foreign Office and the Department for Industry, Department of Business. I spoke a couple of weeks ago to Kwasi Kwarteng, who's the Business Secretary. I think the government, some parts of the government anyway, recognise the importance of London. Also work closely with the government in relation to some parts of dealing with the vaccine rollout as well. I think this impression the public get that politicians hate each other is not true. I mean, just, you know this. I mean, you know, and I'm sure Shaun does. But actually, behind the scenes, when there's no election coming up, we do work quite closely and quite well together.
Let's talk about your relationship with the Conservative Party, Shaun Bailey. Everything that I've read last few months, they don't seem to want you to run for Mayor of London. There's lots of talk about potentially getting rid of you and trying to replace you.
I mean,
do you feel at home in the Conservative Party? I
feel at home anywhere I go. And to answer Jason's question, absolutely stand up for London first. Been doing it all my life, all my career, right from when I started my charity right up to now. As for your question, Tom, I was selected by the members. And what's very interesting, every time someone started on me, the members have rode to my rescue, and so is the Prime Minister. It's very interesting when he rang me and he said, I won't use the exact language he used, but he said basically, don't bother with them. They tried this on me in 2006. It's politics, isn't it? People try on you. But let's be clear, if it's about about being independent and fighting London's corner always. And if that means taking on anybody, fair enough. And I think some of the argy-bargy I've had with the party is because I am very independently minded. I don't think anybody is right about everything, and I'm prepared to have the conversation.
Do you talk about politics being conducted in a manner that voters would like to see happen? You talked about that happening outside of an election. Do you two get on?
For me, it's just not personal. It's just not that way. I don't, like, if you come to the London Assembly where I'm a member, the Labour, the Green, everybody, even the baggies, we all get on. We try to achieve goals. I've never seen this as personal. It's just not like that for me.
Do you respect Shaun Bailey and the campaign he's running?
I find some of the views he has about women, about girls, about people like me who celebrate Eid, about my Hindu friends who celebrate Diwali, about poorer Londoners, about multiculturalism, I find them offensive, and so I can't like this guy. But he's not my enemy, he's my opponent, and so the way we carry ourselves is really important. So what I won't do is personalise this against Shaun Bailey, his family, his ethnicity or his religion.
Can I ask you about that, Shaun Bailey? Sadiq Khan talks about what you'd said around Eid. You wrote for the CPS think tank in 2005, I speak to people from Brent and they are having Muslim and Hindi days off. What it does is rob Britain of its community. You've also said you think it is easier for black people to integrate based on the fact they're more likely to speak English.
What it was about is I come from a very poor community that suffers hugely. We're always trying to separate it out, always trying to keep us away from school, always trying to keep us away from moving forward. And my big thing, if we're going to do well here, you've got to integrate, you've got to get involved. And why should we always be the chosen victim? Why do we always have the ones, poor health outcomes, poor employment outcomes, all of those things? And that was a conversation that I was having with my community. And it's very interesting that people in our ivory towers, pulling things out of context, who have no idea what it's like to be born of the street, raised on the street in London, have to cope with those situations.
Can I just say, I was raised on a council estate. I also came from a poor community. I've never held those views.
Do you step back from those views now?
I've always told people, look,
you don't think these views now represent who you are,
that,
or you still
that
have this
a,
opinion?
That was a long time ago. It's a different conversation. And of course, if anybody's offended, I've apologised profusely. But the real thing here is, what does that mean for my understanding of crime now? Why the mayor is completely misunderstood and crime's risen in communities? Because he doesn't understand the conversations that people are having. He doesn't understand the impact of having people in your community who are not pursued because he made cuts to the police.
Let me ask
All of these things make it harder for poorer communities in London to move forward.
Let me ask you about the race report. Do you think, Sadiq Khan, that London displays systemic racism?
In parts. There's two parts to this, and they're not necessarily contradict each other. One is, yes, there has been huge improvements in our city and our country over the last 40 years. When my dad arrived in this country, there were signs in B&Bs, in guest houses and pubs saying no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. Within a generation, his son is the mayor of this city. So of course there's been progress, but there is institutional racism, there is structural racism, and the government report 2 weeks ago is a joke. And I'm surprised that Shaun Bailey, who claims he stands up for our city, you haven't heard a peep from him criticising the government or their report.
Do you think it's a joke, this race report?
There's two things. It's interesting how busy the mayor is putting words in my mouth. That's always interesting me. I think you should...
Well, say your own words.
So here's the thing. The report was a report. It doesn't make any difference to people on the ground, but it tried to signify some of the progress that is made. I was born in an area as a great big NFL voice. We used to spend all our time running away from the NF. Those sort of things don't happen now. But we still do have structural racism that affects young black people. If you look, for instance, about graduate unemployment, more than double in the black community. So there's challenges to be made, but to ignore some of the progress, to turn this report into a wholly political thing so we don't have the conversation about progress, I think has been wrong. I speak to black people and what they focus on is a statute commission. They say, for instance, that has been hugely divisive. They feel that it's set back our relationship in the city, and that's something that was instigated by Sadiq Khan. So these things swinging roundabouts, I know that the black community are focused on progress, and this report is just a small part of that.
We could spend a lot of time on this, but I'm aware that lots of people want to get on about different issues. Kate is in Tufnell Park. Hi, Kate.
Hello, Tom.
Hello.
Council housing. They, whether it's Labour or Conservative, they seem to have an aversion against council housing or housing associations. And Sadiq Khan has put lots of money into Islington, and what happens is developers come in, and then the social housing and council housing, a lot of it goes by the way. It doesn't happen. Take Holloway Prison. Islington Journal and the Camden Journal are exactly the same. We women and men have to go on marches to get the councils to listen to us. And do you know what? They don't.
Well, Kate, let me put the question then to Shaun Bailey first. What are you going to do to build more social housing in London?
So you set aside £1.3 billion to continue the building of social houses in London. You keep the 35% target. You don't use the mayor's 50% target because that's drastically lowered the number of houses that you have. Also, as well, you control developers. The mayor will talk about a record amount of council homes, but he won't tell you he missed his target by such a wide margin. He talked about 80,000 homes a year. He hasn't built for 40,000 homes in 5 years. We have to focus, and that means taking control away from developers, bringing it into City Hall, having a centrally backed, centrally controlled housing operation from City Hall that has one goal: to deliver houses. And then when you do that, it means you can build the social housing you need, and you can also build intermediate housing up at 100,000 homes for £100,000, so that Londoners have an opportunity to own.
100,000 homes for £100,000?
Using shared ownership.
Absolutely. You'd sell them for, or
you'd sell them for £100,000
each.
Yes,
guaranteed £100,000.
Shared ownership.
Who would build them?
City Hall builders. They're out there. The reason a mayor misses his targets.
You build at a loss.
No. You build. You have money. You've been given £4 billion by the government to provide these homes. You then sell your portion at that lower rate. The reason you do this, 87% of Londoners want to own. And if you're at home listening to this now, imagine how good it would be if I could help you get away from your dodgy landlord. If I could help you have some equity in a building. Londoners want this. We should be doing this as well as providing social homes as well.
Would you bring in rent controls?
No. Rent controls have never worked anywhere in the country. And I remember when in the world, actually. And I remember when Sadiq Khan said he was going to use rent controls, he shrunk back from that because Londoners started to understand what it really means. It means one generation get locked in and everybody else gets locked out.
Sadiq Khan.
Well, look, people at home are probably bamboozled with all these numbers Shaun Bailey's throwing out that he's making up as he goes along. Kate, listen, I was raised in a council estate. I know the difference it made to my mum and dad having security of tenure, but an affordable rent that they could afford. I'm really proud that I ditched the dodgy definition of what Boris Johnson thought an affordable home was, £500 million to buy, or 8% market value to rent. And last year, Kate, we began building more council homes than any year since 1983. The year before, we broke the record for the most homes built in any year since 1984. And by the way, Kate, in the last year when Boris Johnson was mayor, only 3 homes for a social rent were begun. Last year, more than 7,000. But it's a fact, Kate, you're right. Successive governments have let London down because what we don't need is luxury penthouse flats built for foreigners to invest in. What we do need is homes for Londoners, and we're starting to lay the foundations
hold on, Tom.
for those affordable homes.
This is important. The mayor told UK and all Londoners you'd get 80,000 homes a year. He hasn't built 40,000 homes in 5 years. He missed by a wide margin. I used to be homeless, Kate. I fully understand the power of having somewhere to stay, more than most people. My mum raised me and my single brother in that council house as well. I get it, Kate. That's why we have to have targets that can actually be reached. That's why we have to build and use all the money that the government provides. What the mayor failed to tell you is he had a record settlement from government. He's still sitting on £500 million that he hasn't even used. London needs a fresh start when it comes to building homes, 100%.
The numbers are, in order to throw more numbers at people, is that, yes, between March 2019 and 2020, 13,523 affordable homes were built in that year. That is a record for City Hall. And yet, you have started, Sadiq Khan, less than half of the affordable homes you promised to build by 2023.
No, because the deal we have with government is every year we start a certain number of homes, Kate, and the good news is not only have we met the targets from the government, we've exceeded them. And the idea is because we're a standing start, Kate, the first year I became mayor, in the year before only 7,000 homes had been begun. The good news is we broke the record the following year, 12,500. We broke the record again, 14,500. We broke the record again last year, 17,200. And we're on course to continue increasing. And every year, Kate, we're breaking records. But, and here's the but, we can't build the homes we need unless the government gives us more support, because the market won't provide the council homes that you so desperately need. And so,
but that's why you've got to set up something on your own. And Kate, if this was all about money, why are we sitting on £500 million? It's sat there. It could be out in the market. It could be providing homes, but instead it's sat there. We need a fresh direction, and we need to do things differently, Kate. That's why I'm suggesting we start up something in City Hall. We become developer. We're not beholden to developers. The mayor has been beholden to developers his entire mayoralty, and it's meant absolutely just record lows. We just haven't seen anything like the numbers that he promised us, not even close.
Well, I think there's clearly a vault at City Hall I've not found where there's money that Shaun Bailey's going to use to buy electric buses, to reopen police stations, to have more youth centres, to have more police officers, to have all council homes. And he keeps on throwing out these figures and stuff. The reality, Kate, is what you've seen over the last 5 years, starting to lay the foundations of the council homes we need, the social rent homes we need, the affordable homes we need. And by the way, what you aren't going to see is developers WhatsApping me or texting me, and you're going to see my families getting contracts to build these homes.
Kate, what you're seeing here is a mayor. Every time you hear the words government, prepare yourself to hear an excuse. You're seeing a mayor who simply won't take responsibility for his day job. He absolutely has a £500 million sat there that he hasn't used. That is a fact. All of the things I'm telling you can and should be paid for. We're seeing a mayor who has no ambition for London. He's not focused on our future.
Well, let's hear from Kate about what you've made of it. Kate.
Well, with Shaun's, the part ownership, I don't believe. I was asking about council houses, not part ownership. And that's the problem. We don't want part. You keep saying people want it. Who? Tell me who wants it. Anyone down my street who wants it? No, we don't. We want council houses. No 75%.
Okay. Kate, thank you, Shaun.
Kate, I say both, Kate. We spend 1.3 billion getting those social rent houses out there. But, Kate, it's 87% of Londoners who say they want to own. That's not my dream, that's their dream. I want to create many more homeowners. Sadiq Khan's after creating many more landlords.
One very quick question, Sadiq Khan. You're going to bring in rent control still? That's still your policy?
We've got the power to do so. What I'm going to do is...
You've not got the power to do so.
If we win a big enough mandate on May the 6th, I think it's unarguable to the government to give us the powers to do so. There's been a temporary reduction in rents over the last year because of the pandemic. What we need is a permanent reduction in rents, but also we need security of tenure. And here's the good news. People said it wasn't possible for me to have a rogue landlord register. Did it. People said it wasn't possible to persuade the government to get rid of the fees that tenants pay. Did it. People said it wasn't possible to persuade the government to get rid of no-fault eviction. Done it. And so I'm saying to London, lend me your vote on May the 6th. If I win big enough, the government will have to respond to our demands.
I've got to say, that work the government did for itself. There was many more people involved in delivering those things than just Sadiq Khan. And let's be clear, you can't get rent controls because you'll have to give it to the whole country, and that would devastate housing for poor people. Ask anyone who's lived in New York how young people have to scan their obituaries to find somewhere to live. We don't want that in London. We don't want that in the UK.
Shaun, thank you. Let's get to another call before we have to finish at 12. Deepak is in Hendon. Hi, Deepak.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call. It's a question around the city and the finance industry there. Now, obviously, it's been sort of one of the key drivers for growth over many years. I'd like to hear from the panel what they think they're going to be able to do to keep it at its number one spot, factoring in Brexit and obviously last year with COVID, which has changed the landscape now, probably or possibly irreversibly. It's interesting to hear what their thoughts are.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't come to you earlier because this is such a big issue. We're going to spend probably the whole hour on it. Just on the Brexit point, Shaun Bailey, do you think Brexit is beneficial for the City of London?
I think Brexit has happened now. I think most Londoners have accepted that. We have to move on. I think we need to look at the opportunities it's given to us. For instance,
but you supported Brexit?
Yes, I spoke to the Indian ambassador and she was very happy about the visa system we set up with Indian students. What wouldn't have been possible in different circumstances. But of course, you talk to the Secretary of State for International Trade and she's been able to sign 62 bilateral trade agreements. I've spoken to a number of high commissioners, ambassadors from different countries, and they're telling me that that's the way that trade will probably go in the future. So we're going to have to use this as a benefit, as a way of moving forward. And when you speak to the city, there's certain challenges that I think have yet to be answered. So the plan would be to take the government on wherever needed. And that's why I'll have a deputy mayor for business, international trade and the hospitality industry as well.
Sadiq Khan, you are looking to bolster a £6 million campaign that will help get people back into central London as the restrictions are eased further. How are you going to persuade people to come back in?
Well, firstly, it's worth acknowledging what Deepak is talking about. The financial services is worth $1.32 billion to the UK economy. It's one of our biggest exports.
1.32 billion?
132 billion, I beg your pardon. 132 billion to our economy. 60 billion loan in London. I think I've swallowed Shaun's calculator, getting all the numbers wrong. But also, we've actually got no deal for financial services, which is the bad news. So, Deepak, what I'm going to do is to bang the drum for our city Tom's very kindly mentioned one of our policies, which is to encourage people to come back to the West End. You know, Deepak, one of the reasons why people come to London rather than Frankfurt or Paris or Madrid or Barcelona or Dublin is because of our ecosystem. We've got culture, we've got financial services, we've got legal services, we've got tech, we've got digital, life sciences, universities, and we've got to encourage people to come back to the West End.
The question was, the money's fine, but how are you going to persuade people, particularly commuters, who...
Let me give you some examples.
Don't want to get paid a train fare.
We've now managed to get an 8th game at Wembley for the Euros. 8 games at Wembley. England can go all the way to the finals in the Euro 2021. So that will encourage people to come back to London, including those from across the country. We've got India, Pakistan, New Zealand coming for cricket this summer. We're working with the theatre companies and those in the West End to line up brilliant shows this summer, including outdoor shows as well. We're spending £4 million on top on our high streets. But what it is, Deepak, though, we've got to do it with having at the fore of our mind this virus is still here. So we roll out the vaccine, we get test and trace finally working after 50 months of malfunctioning, and we get people going back to the centre of London. Deepak, here's the point. Deepak,
Let Shaun Bailey come in and I'll let you answer.
So Deepak, we need to see a change. Firstly, we need to support the city in every way it needs supported. That's why I've talked about deputy mayors who constantly represent inside government and into the rest of the world what the city needs to deliver. But of course, we must make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. When we had the COVID outbreak, the mayor, by his own admission, disappeared. So he lacks leadership, and it fell to people like me to ask for the congestion charge to be suspended.
Well, you said that lockdown was too hard in October.
I said that we could do regional lockdowns across London. London's a very huge area. But the point
You suggested that Sadiq Khan was making life harder for Londoners by demanding tougher measures.
Yes, by locking down the whole of London. Because remember this, there's 300,000 Londoners who've already lost their jobs. We need to be able to look them in the eye and say we did everything to preserve that job.
Let's do this.
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure the Mayor of London could do that. The thing going forward now, of course, is how do we get people back into the City of London safely? Remember, London is a footfall city. If you sell coffee or insurance, if people are not here, your business won't work. Wrap up. We want to get people
And Shaun
here.
Bailey, you're going to give us your closing arguments for 60 seconds in just a moment. But Sadiq Khan, where did you go during the lockdown?
Londoners saw me throughout, including on LBC. The only show I didn't do, Tom, was yours. Apologies for that, Tom.
I won't take it personally.
I think you're getting your own back today. Look, because of people like Shaun Bailey, this is a really important point, because of lockdown sceptics, one of the reasons why we had to have a lockdown in December was because of the delay in September, when experts were telling the Prime Minister to have a national circuit breaker. People like Shaun Bailey said no. There are more than 18,000 Londoners who lost their lives, and Shaun's got to recognise that his words have consequences.
So let's look at it this way. Sadiq Khan was the person who said we should be in the European vaccination situation. If the government's vaccination situation rolled out by the NHS has been a massive success, if we follow Sadiq Khan's example, how many more people would have died?
We will come back to this, I'm sure, at another time or during the campaign. Gents, we have run out of time for this programme, for this hour, but I do want to give you a final minute to give your closing statements. And Shaun Bailey, given you went first for your opening statement, I'd like you to take the floor for 60 seconds now, sir.
London, it's like this. We need a fresh start in London. We need to overcome the 5 years of failure we've seen from Sadiq Khan. If you're a woman or girl in London, you've been told the streets are not safe for you by Sadiq Khan. If you're a young person, you've been exposed to an 86% rise in robbery. If you are anybody in London, you've been hit with more and more taxes as Sadiq Khan has failed to deliver on. He delivered less than half his manifesto pledges. I have a plan to give London a fresh start, to make our communities safer, to make our London greener, and to make it a much more pleasant place to live. Join me in giving London a fresh start.
Sadiq Khan, your minute.
There is so much at stake at this election. It's a two-horse race between me, who will stand up for our city and deliver a better and brighter future after the pandemic than before, or the Tory candidate who only talks our city down and who doesn't share London's values of openness, equality and respect for diversity. So I say this to Londoners: if you care about this great city and our people, if you love London and what we stand for, and if you want every Londoner to have the chance to fulfil their potential, regardless of race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, disability or class, then come out and vote for it on May the 6th. Vote for London and vote for me and Labour. Thank you.
Sadiq Khan, Labour candidate for Mayor of London, best of luck. Shaun Bailey, Conservative candidate, best of luck to you too. Thank you both very much indeed for coming in. I must remind you that Shaun Berry, the candidate for the Green Party, and the Liberal Democrats candidate Louisa Porritt will be joining me next week on the programme. The full list of candidates. We ready for this? This is Radio Gold. It's a full list of candidates. Shaun Bailey, Conservatives. Cam Bailiev, Renew. Shaun Berry of the Green Party. Count Bimpface for Mayor of London, Valerie Brown, Burning Pink, Piers Corbyn, Let London Live, Max Fosh, Independent, Lawrence Fox, The Reclaim Party, Peter Gammons, UKIP, Richard Hewison, Rejoin EU, Vanessa Hudson, Animal Welfare Party, still going, Steve Keller here, Social Democrat Party, David Curtin, Heritage Party, Farah London Independent, Nims Obunj Independent, Nico Omilana, who is independent, Louisa Porritt of the Liberal Democrats, Mandu Reid, the Women's Equality Party, Brian Rose, London Real Party. The full list of candidates, should you need or require any more, are on the website, lbc.co.uk. Gents, thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you in the studio. Best of luck in the campaign. We will be back after the news headlines talking about the social distancing measures. Could they be dropped by June? Tom Swarbrick here, LBC 1201.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation.